So good afternoon, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the break, the lunch, maybe coffee. We are now about to start the afternoon session. My name is Jaromír Harmáček. I work the Social Progress Imperative as a senior research analyst. You could have seen me presenting the methodology of the Global Index on Tuesday, but don't worry, there will be no more technical stuff, no more methodology. I am here to introduce our next speaker, Professor Scott Stern. Scott is a professor of management of technology at MIT Sloan School of Management, and he's also our key academic advisor at SPI, and he has been incredibly helpful, especially to us in the research team with our annual updates of the Global Index, as well as with the preparation of the historical index that we are currently working on. Today, Scott will be speaking about innovation ecosystems for social impact. And not to forget, we're also delighted to have Scott's son, Ethan, with us, who just graduated from high school. So congrats to Ethan, and welcome to Scott.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. And thank you, Jaromír, and thank you to everybody. It's just really my pleasure and honor to be here. The first thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to change the title. Sophie and I had a big discussion about what I was going to do about 6 weeks ago, but then I abandoned the plan. But I promise it'll still be within 15 minutes, so we should be in good shape. And really, I just want to thank all of you. It's just been great getting to know some of you and just seeing the kind of energy and thoughtfulness and depth of the discussions over the past 2 days. So what I want to talk about for the next, do you want to turn on the timer just to make sure we're on time? What I want to talk about for the next few minutes is sort of a kind of dimension that has been on the sidelines of this conference, and I think has been on a little bit on the sidelines of how we've thought about social progress, which is that, but I think kind of gets at a very critical set of issues about when do we see private sector actors that are able to somehow make an impact beyond a purely economic performance. And so we were just talking, right, from the viewpoint of big bank, right? There are a lot of machinery in place to make sure that there is a return on investment. And the question is, does that go alongside or not the promotion of social progress? And so let me kind of start with, I'm going to tell a few stories, but I promise there's going to be a little data exercise towards the end. Not too much methodology today, if that's okay. So these are 3 students. I'm privileged to be at MIT. We have extraordinary students there. Many of them become entrepreneurs of various types. This group of students, Dave Auerbach, Lindsay Stradley, and Ani Valabanini, but I'm not going to say that correctly, were students about a decade ago at MIT, and they actually took a class called D-Lab, and then they went to Nairobi, Kenya. They actually had a bunch of experience in development, and they sort of looked around to see the various problems in the slums of Nairobi. And one problem they noticed was that, and I know our social progress indicators would show this, is just that there's a very low level of access to sanitation, to toilets. And that's an important problem. They also noticed a bunch of other challenges about access to reliable food for reliable food sources, energy. Most people aren't on the grid. Lots of challenges. And so over time, it took them about a year to get this, and then a long time to scale it. But the first thing they did, and they got nice grants from Clinton Foundation, Gates Foundation, the UN, they established a product, you see it there, this kind of porta potty kind of thing, and they established micro enterprises to enable entrepreneurs, kind of micro entrepreneurs within the slums, right? You can see some of the network that they're starting to build there, a very early photo from like 6 months in. And so they would, for free, go and train and provide the initial capital and get these little micro businesses off the ground to provide sanitation, to provide toilets. And that is a pretty good thing. And the second problem, you think about it, is if you're going to provide toilets, you have to somehow get rid of the waste. Right? They sometimes use the phrase, this is their quote, shit happens. And so then, also for free, once again, funded by nonprofits originally, so on and so forth, they would remove the waste. And so they would really let the micro entrepreneurs, many of whom had very limited education, kind of focus on the core business of actually providing this service for money that actually solves a social progress need. And then the third piece is they knew there wasn't enough energy production. And now if you've started to cart lots of human waste off-site, you have biomass. And that you can sell for profit. And so they established Sanergy as a for-profit enterprise. And they were committed right from the beginning to saying, while we have a very big social progress agenda, we care about actually this paying the bills and more so that we can scale. And for those of you who know Sally Osberg and Roger Martin, they would say that's actually one of the engines of social entrepreneurship when it works, is that you get to scale it because you're making money. And you're also solving a big social progress challenge. And so let me be clear. You could imagine that the Sanergy team is featured very often in our promotion of entrepreneurship at MIT. Right? I take no credit for this. I knew them as students, but I will tell you, we talk about them a lot. And why do we talk about them a lot? Right? Oh, wait, hold on. Hold on just 1 second. I missed a slide there somehow. Okay, right? Because they're solving a big problem. They're doing it through entrepreneurship, so it's sustainable. But I would make the claim, and it's true, that when I say it's sustainable, it's now scaled to about, I think about 1.5 million, households, individuals within these, within Nairobi and some related cities now have been impacted by their service. And that's a big number. If you put a valuation, though, on this, in terms of an economic performance, they've made some money, and they more than pay the bills, but this is no unicorn. You're not going to see this touted as one of the big IPOs, right? It's a sustainable enterprise that's scaling, but is actually pretty distant from an outsized economic return, right? I just want you to think about that for a second. How do we actually measure startup performance? How do we measure the performance of entrepreneurs? Well, very often in the world of growth-oriented, or what I might call innovation-driven entrepreneurship, right? Kind of these growth-oriented firms, we measure the traditional metric is the firm worth a lot of money? Did you create a startup that got sold for or listed on the stock market? And why do we care about that number, just so you're clear? Because investors care about that number. Angels, venture capitalists, others, that's the moment where they exit and they earn a large outsized financial return because at the moment of exit, they did right. The company, right, had much more value than the money that was put into it. Whether or not they earned profits, I guess in Uber's case, we don't know, right? So on and so forth. Right? Twitter, nice money-losing enterprise. There we go, whatever. But this is how you measure startup performance. Okay? Okay, oh, sorry. What's the relationship? So very often entrepreneurs will say that they are committed to advancing social progress, They'll be enthusiastic about it. They'll come to meetings like this, right? And essentially, the logic runs something like, and for those of you who were at the sessions on Tuesday, right, kind of similar slides here, right? But the idea would be a startup, by introducing a new product or service that fills a gap in the marketplace, you earn not only an economic return, but you target and enhance social progress. And the Sanergy case is like that. And let me be clear, even among our growth-oriented firms, there are firms that are like that. So I serve on the advisory board of this company, but this is a good example. This is Michael Martin and Nick Horlick, the founders of RapidSOS. Almost a decade ago, Michael became totally fascinated with the challenges of emergency response, basically personal safety, basically in the United States and actually also in Canada and most places at that time. The emergency response system was built for a landline world. Of course, we all have supercomputers in our pocket, how to make that transition. And over the past, and let me be clear, that's, this is in the most critical moments of life and death, you call 911 in the United States, or this is, at the time, and you're on hold for 25 minutes as they try to figure out where you are. And they solved that problem. First, Nick Horlick, who had a PhD in nuclear engineering, actually solved the problem on a technical level, and then they were able to scale it up. And RapidSOS today is in every phone in this room. Both it is the kind of standard way that emergency SOS is done, both for Android, both for the iPhone and for Android. Okay? And they have lots of other parts of it. And every single day I serve on their advisory board, so I get the updates on all this. They do incredible work actually saving lives on the margin between how fast you can respond to the emergency with this system relative to the alternative. And that's a metric they use, is lives saved. Like that's a metric, that's a corporate metric alongside financial performance. However, that story, right, once again, fairly inspiring. They're a great company. There's no necessary linkage there. So I hope I'm not offending anyone in the room when I say, I don't know how many of you know Robinhood. Robinhood is to trade stocks online from your mobile phone with no information so you can lose money. Okay? You go for it, you be you, okay? Right? To the moon, right? And the founders here, let me be clear, so RapidSOS is doing pretty good. Robinhood was at the time of its IPO last year worth more than $10 billion, of which a significant, and that money, basically, right, a good fraction of that $10 billion was returned in the form of either, people could keep the stock or whatever, but in terms of an exit valuation to the investors in Robinhood, which were a bunch of top-tier venture capitalists, as well as the founders. So far, so good? And then, of course, and I won't spend too much time on this because I'm going to run out of time, I can see that, of course, social progress itself can itself enable growth entrepreneurship, right? If I had time, I'd give you much more of this story, but Anita Roddick's founding of The Body Shop, right? She took advantage of some emerging trends at the time about inclusiveness and tolerance, and she understood, actually at a fairly deep level, she started as a very small micro-entrepreneur and really scaled. But what she did is she understood that there was a difference between the beauty business and the care business. And she brought an ethical and values-based approach to The Body Shop that allowed that to be one of the most successful entrepreneurs of the kind of last quarter century, right? Of the 20th century, right? More generally, I love this study. This is actually about patenting, not entrepreneurship, but there's a great study that shows after the legalization of domestic partnerships and also, right, in civil unions, you see an increase in innovation in those states. This is by Vakili Kelev, Kevin Vakili, and Lorena Zhang. And so the question is, in some sense, once you see this, you're like, well, it's the usual problem. What's driving what, and how should we even think about this? And so, along with two colleagues, this is Jacqueline Pless and Jorge Guzman, we've been talking about this for about the last 6 or 8 months, kind of in various different conversations. They are not responsible for what I'm showing on the screen, so if you don't like it, that's on me. But if you like it, that's probably their idea. But the good question to ask is, just what's the incidence rate? Do startups, those kind of things we see in the press, meaningfully advance social progress, and what types. And so how are we going to do that, right? So we draw a little bit here on the thinking of Osborne and Martin, and where they really talk about what you really need to be doing is changing the equilibrium. That's the special challenge of social entrepreneur. A for-profit social entrepreneur has to not only earn an economic return, but they have to shift the social equilibrium to address the social need. Okay? And the question is, right, so let's see how many of these startups are aiming, even if they're not necessarily succeeding, to change the equilibrium, right? And also realizing a high level of startup performance as measured in equity valuation. So how are we going to do that in our last minute and a half? Okay? We're going to take advantage of this phenomenon of unicorns. We have lots of other data, but this is a little cute trick. Okay? So what we did is we looked at about 200 startup firms, each of which, these are those successful startups of the last decade. Okay? All of them have exited for more than $1 billion. Okay? Their total valuation is $2 trillion, which is like a good amount of money. Okay? And then what we did, actually Ethan was helpful with this, right, is we looked at what do they actually do? And so if they were just like a delivery service for, DoorDash, we love DoorDash, I love DoorDash, but DoorDash is not like directly speaking to social progress. Do you see what I'm saying? On the other hand, if they're trying to change the equilibrium in an important area or really introduce something that's addressing a healthcare challenge, 23andMe, right, was aiming to change our information about health. Okay, and so that got listed actually under both access to information and health. Okay, so just to kind of give you a sense, so we go through, I'm sensitive to time, right? Core Social Progress is a company like Moderna. We also allowed for kind of mobility and creativity, so companies like in the ride-sharing industry, we kind of gave them a positive, and then we had kind of not social progress. Toast is a payment processor. They're a great firm, like really great. They're just not really social progress oriented. So here's the facts I can give you. What percentage of all of these unicorns are social progress unicorns? A little more than half. Right? So out of 196, there's exactly 100 that are social, that meaningfully check off a social progress box, and 96 that you look at them and you say, there's nothing wrong with them as an economic concern, but they're not really reading onto beyond economic. Second, what components do startups advance? Okay, oh, I missed a slide there somehow. And so the key is there's massive variation across this. More than half, so we think of it as start with 200 basically, more than 50 of the ones who are doing social progress are doing it through advancement in information and communications. That is the domain where we see the highest linkage between something we all agree is beyond the economic, and there's a pretty strong case for these outsized startup returns. Do you see what I'm saying? What are the other, let's say, right? Is the other areas that we see meaningful action in are health and wellness, energy, right? Mostly clean energy, and some in education. Though interestingly, even though they had a high valuation, I think we can all agree the MOOC, the realization, right? We haven't realized the value of MOOCs as a society, but at least it was a good experiment, even though I've been critical of MOOCs in other contexts. Last, very low, essentially 0 to 1, in a whole bunch of different dimensions. Personal rights, personal freedom, right? You can't, can you think of a company that's meaningfully moved the dial on these dimensions? Probably not. So, I know Sophie's about to kill me because I'm over time, right? But many of the most successful startups over the past decade are premised on addressing a social progress challenge. But the vast bulk of them are in a narrow band of activities. And critical components of social progress sort of maybe the ones that were most in need of fixing, there seems to be actually almost no meaningful traction. And so I just leave you with a question I think does prompt maybe the panel that's going to follow, is what can we do to ensure that the incentives, the motives, and institutions of entrepreneur allow us to leverage the power of innovation and entrepreneurship to address our most pressing social progress challenges. Thank you guys so much.